The Georgia sun was unrelenting that day, casting a harsh glare on the press tent erected outside a community center in Rome, where Marjorie Taylor Green was holding her latest media event. Dozens of local journalists had gathered under the shade, microphones out, cameras live, and notepads poised. Green, clad in a sleeveless red dress and a white blazer, stood confidently at the podium, grinning as if she were about to give a TED Talk on liberty and protein shakes. "America is under siege," she declared, her voice a mix of preacher and coach. "By woke ideology, by socialist infiltration, and by liberal policies that are pushing God out of our schools and drag queens into our libraries." The crowd of supporters behind the cameras erupted into applause, hoisting signs with slogans like "God, guns, and green and no pronouns in my America." She smiled, soaking in the adoration like vitamin D. But just off-center in the crowd was Owen Bright, a freelance political reporter from San Francisco. Young, sharp-suited, and armed with a degree in sociology from Brown, Owen didn't fit in. He had a notepad in one hand and a Bluetooth mic clipped discreetly to his collar. He'd been following Green's career for 2 years, partly for work, partly out of fascination. To him, she was a paradox wrapped in a soundbite. When Green opened the floor for questions, the predictable ones came first: border policy, Hunter Biden's laptop, and one oddly phrased inquiry about whether vaccines could alter sexual preferences. Then Owen raised his hand. "Next," Green said, pointing with her chin. Owen stepped forward. "Congresswoman Green, you've spoken extensively about the dangers of progressive ideology and liberal tolerance. My question is, how do you reconcile your stance with the idea that tolerance, at its core, is about accepting differences, something conservatives also claim to value in terms of religious and personal freedoms? Or is tolerance, in your view, inherently a one-sided weapon?" There was a beat of silence. Green blinked once, twice. Then she smiled. But not the kind of smile you'd see in campaign ads, the tight one, all molars, no warmth. "Well, Owen," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "that's a cute question. You probably practiced it in the mirror this morning between sips of your oat milk latte." Laughter erupted from her supporters. "But let me tell you something about tolerance," she continued, her voice growing sharper. "The left loves to talk about it, wave it around like a flag, but they only tolerate what they agree with. Try being a Christian baker in Portland who doesn't want to make a drag-themed wedding cake. You'll find out real quick how tolerant the left actually is." Owen nodded, unfazed. "But isn't that the same logic used by those who refused service based on race in the 60s? Doesn't the principle of public accommodation—" "Don't you dare compare my Christian values to Jim Crow laws," she snapped. "That is intellectual dishonesty at its worst." The atmosphere in the tent tightened like a pulled rubber band. The local news crews zoomed in. Owen kept going. "I'm simply asking where the line is. You argue against what you call forced tolerance, but don't you think there's a risk when public figures frame empathy and acceptance as threats?" Green leaned forward over the podium. "Empathy?" she scoffed. "You want empathy? Tell that to the small business owners burned out during BLM riots. Tell that to little girls forced to share locker rooms with biological males. I'm not anti-tolerance, sweetheart. I'm anti-insanity." The crowd burst into cheers. One man in a "Jesus is my vaccine" shirt shouted, "You tell him, Marge." Owen smiled politely. "So the answer is, you believe tolerance has limits?" "I believe tolerance becomes tyranny when it forces people to deny reality." He opened his notebook. "And who defines reality?" She paused. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. For the first time in their exchange, she didn't have an immediate reply. Owen sensed the shift. Because if reality is something we all perceive differently, doesn't labeling someone else's reality as insane risk silencing necessary voices? Green exhaled sharply, then grinned again, this time with venom. "Listen, I don't need a lecture from a soy boy in a skinny tie about what's real. Men are men. Women are women. Borders matter. Guns save lives. And if that makes me intolerant, then hallelujah, I'll wear that label with pride." A few claps. Some boos. The press tent was officially divided. Behind the cameras, a murmuring buzz had started. Owen had asked the question everyone had been too nervous to bring up. Green had answered, sort of. And now a debate that had simmered beneath the surface of every soundbite was boiling over in front of flashing cameras and rolling news feeds. But the confrontation wasn't over. Because what Green said next would drag the whole room into a deeper fight over what America meant, and who got to define it. For a split second after her outburst, everything was still. The press tent wasn't just quiet, it was frozen. Then Green took a calculated breath and, with a flick of her blonde hair, leaned into the microphone again. You know what? She said, her voice slower now, deliberate. Let's have this out. Let's go ahead and talk about what tolerance really means, since that seems to be the buzzword y'all in the media want to hang around our necks like a millstone. She pointed at Owen like a prosecutor. You want to talk about limits to tolerance? Let's talk about it. Because what you call tolerance, I call cultural Marxism wearing a pride flag. Owen raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. He could feel the eyes of every camera, every local anchor, and half the staffers boring into him. He was used to being the only liberal in the room. This wasn't new, but it was the biggest platform he'd ever had. Green continued, pacing slightly behind the podium now. The left demands tolerance but not mutual tolerance. They want us to affirm things we don't believe, speak words we don't agree with, and pretend we don't see what's plainly in front of us. That's not tolerance. That's coercion. Owen finally interjected. But isn't freedom of thought and belief a two-way street? If you're asking for the right to your perspective, shouldn't others be allowed to express theirs without being labeled radicals or perverts? She smiled again, but this time it was tired. Son, you're confusing freedom of speech with freedom from consequences. You want to go around preaching gender fluidity to toddlers? Don't act shocked when people push back. A reporter from a local station cleared her throat. Congresswoman, are you suggesting people should not be free to live outside traditional gender roles? Green shot her a look. I'm saying if you want to live in a fantasy world, don't expect the rest of us to build you a theme park. Laughter erupted from her supporters again. Someone shouted, Amen. A woman near the back actually stood up and clapped. But Owen's voice cut through. So by that logic, you don't believe in pluralism? Green turned toward him slowly as if sizing up a chessboard. No, I do believe in pluralism. What I don't believe in is the left's version of it, where everyone's beliefs are equally valid, even if they contradict biology, faith, tradition, or common sense. Owen tilted his head. But isn't the heart of democracy exactly that? Competing beliefs? The First Amendment doesn't just protect your speech, Congresswoman. It protects drag queens, atheists, Muslims, and yes, even soy boys like me. More murmurs. The crowd was feeling the tension now. Green didn't blink. You say, democracy. I say mob rule dressed in glitter. There is a difference between respecting someone's right to speak and being forced to applaud everything they say. You want tolerance? Fine. But don't demand celebration. Don't ask me to kneel at the altar of every new alphabet letter that gets added to your acronym. That one hit like a slap. A few people gasped. The mood was shifting from amused to anxious. Owen took a breath. You're framing this as you being forced to celebrate others. But in reality, you're in one of the most powerful positions in the country. Isn't there a moral responsibility to lead with more grace? To understand that for some people, just existing is a form of resistance. Green's eyes narrowed slightly. Grace doesn't mean surrender. And resistance to what? To reality? To tradition? I don't hate anyone. I'm not out here calling for violence. But I will not pretend that every lifestyle choice is equally virtuous. That's not hate. That's discernment. Owen paused, then nodded slowly. You're saying you draw a moral line. My question is, who gets to draw it for everyone else? Boom. That was it. The crowd went silent again. It wasn't just a question, it was a dare. The philosophical floor beneath them shifted. Everyone could feel it. Green didn't answer right away. Her jaw was tight, her hand gripping the podium now. I was elected, she said finally. That gives me the mandate to speak for the people who put me here. Not for every social experiment cooked up on the West Coast. My job is to protect their values. Their children. Their way of life. And what happens, Owen said softly, when those values harm someone else's right to exist as who they are? That was the question that hung in the air as the press event descended into chaos. Green motioned to her aides. We're done here. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted follow-ups. Supporters clapped and cheered. Protesters began chanting outside the tent. But Owen just stood still, notebook at his side, his heart pounding. He hadn't won anything. But he'd drawn the line in the sand and Green had acknowledged it. Neither of them said it, but both knew, they weren't just debating ideas. They were fighting for who got to define America. The moment Marjorie Taylor Green walked off that stage, the internet exploded. Within hours, clips of her confrontation with Owen Bright flooded Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and every politically charged Facebook group from Georgia to Oregon. Her base hailed it as another righteous takedown of liberal hypocrisy, while progressives turned Owen into a folk hero of fact-based resistance. #ToleranceTrap trended nationwide. A meme of Green snarling at Owen next to the caption, "You want empathy? Tell it to the small business owners. Racked up 500,000 likes before sundown. But for Green, the real battle had just begun. Inside her team's temporary war room, a cramped back office behind the community center stocked with Red Bulls, vape pens, and 2 unpaid interns, Marjorie was pacing furiously. "Get me Tucker," she barked, tossing her phone onto the table. "We need to get ahead of this. By tomorrow morning, I want 5 million people convinced that kid was a Soros plant." One of her aides, a former Turning Point intern named Blake, hesitated. "Congresswoman, I don't think we should lean into the Soros thing again. Last time." "I don't care," she snapped. "They're calling me intolerant. I will not be lectured on empathy by a man who probably owns a pronoun pin collection." Meanwhile, Owen was back in his hotel room, a modest 2-star on the edge of town that smelled vaguely of mildew and Vanilla Breeze air freshener. He was sitting on the bed, stunned by the rapid viral storm he had unintentionally walked into. His phone buzzed non-stop, calls from MSNBC, NPR, even The View. His Twitter followers had quadrupled in 3 hours. A verified user had already posted a screenshot of his face with the caption, "Owen Bright for President 2040. But Owen wasn't celebrating. He was staring at the paused frame of the video, Green's eyes narrowed, his own hand frozen mid-gesture. What haunted him wasn't how it looked. It was the realization that neither of them had actually listened to the other. They'd both played roles. And now the entire country was treating it like a season finale. That night, Green went live on Truth Social. Framed by an American flag and a taxidermy deer head, she looked directly into the camera, voice calm but smoldering with defiance. "The fake news media is lying again," she began. "Today I was ambushed by a left-wing activist pretending to be a journalist. And guess what? I told the truth. I said what every American mom and dad are thinking. This isn't about hate. It's about protecting our children from ideological poison." She paused dramatically. "They say I'm intolerant. I say I'm awake." Applause emojis flooded the screen. The next morning, Green appeared on Fox News. "The radical left wants you to believe that disagreeing with them is violence," she told the host. "Well, I'm not apologizing. I believe in biology, in God, in borders, and if that makes me a monster in their little Twitter circus, then so be it." The host nodded solemnly. "You're a fighter, Marjorie." But across the aisle, the storm brewed in the other direction. Owen appeared on a podcast that evening, a modest, indie show hosted by a progressive pastor from Minneapolis. Halfway through the episode, the host asked, "What would you say to Congresswoman Green now, if you could?" Owen hesitated. "I think I'd ask her why she's so afraid," he said quietly. "Not of me, but of people living differently. Of people who exist outside her blueprint of the world." He paused, staring down at his microphone. "She talks a lot about protecting values. But I think sometimes what we're really protecting are walls we built a long time ago. And maybe we've forgotten what's on the other side." That quote was clipped and shared across liberal accounts within the hour. Meanwhile, the fallout intensified. Green's staff scrambled to control the narrative. They scheduled appearances, released statements, even started selling "Tolerance is Tyranny" t-shirts on her website. But behind closed doors they were nervous. Her last campaign had been surprisingly close. A few more clips like this one, and the moderate suburban moms they needed to keep the seat might finally jump ship. And then the unthinkable happened. Owen received an invitation. From Green. It arrived via email. Brief, chilly, but unmistakably real. "Mr. Bright, you claim to want dialogue. Let's have one. Not a soundbite. Not a stage show. A real conversation. I'll be in DC next week. Let's meet. No cameras. No crowds. You want to understand where I'm coming from? Prove it. MTG." Owen read it 5 times. Outside, cars passed by on the highway. Inside, he felt like he'd swallowed a match. Was this real? Was she bluffing? Was it a trap? A PR stunt? He didn't know. But something about it felt too strange to ignore. He clicked reply. "I'm in. Let's talk." He wasn't sure what he was walking into. Only that it wasn't going to be ordinary. He was met by a young staffer with unnaturally straight teeth and "Don't tread on me" socks peeking from under his suit pants. The staffer didn't speak much as he led Owen through a series of quiet back halls, past faded portraits and doors that looked too thin for the secrets they likely guarded. Finally, they reached a small conference room tucked between 2 committee offices. Inside, Marjorie Taylor Green stood alone, arms crossed, leaning against a long oak table. No camera crew. No crowd. No flag pin. Just her and a stainless steel water bottle that looked like it had been through several riots. "Bright," she said without smiling. You came. You invited me, Owen replied. She gestured to a chair. Sit. He did. For a few moments neither of them spoke. Just the ticking of an old wall clock filled the silence. Green spoke first. You know what the real problem is with your side? Owen raised an eyebrow. We're too polite? She ignored the jab. You all think that tolerance means agreement. It doesn't. You want everyone to celebrate your beliefs. Wave flags. Change pronouns. Bake the damn cake. But real tolerance? It means I let you live how you want, even if I think it's nuts. He folded his hands calmly. Okay. So if someone wants to live as their authentic self, even if it goes against your beliefs, you're okay with that? I didn't say I approve. I said I'll tolerate it. But you legislate against it. She exhaled long and hard. Because when it comes into schools, into churches, when it starts rewriting what our kids learn, then it's not private anymore. Then it's war. Owen nodded slowly. So tolerance ends where discomfort begins? No, she snapped. Tolerance ends where indoctrination begins. And who decides that line? A beat passed. For the first time in the entire exchange, Green looked almost uncertain. I don't know, she admitted. But I sure as hell don't trust you to do it. Owen leaned forward. Then maybe we're not so different. She squinted. Don't flatter yourself. He smiled. I mean it. We both want to protect people. You think the country's slipping into moral chaos. I think it's waking up from centuries of moral delusion. But we're both drawing lines in the sand. We just disagree on where. Green took a sip from her water bottle. Do you believe in absolute truth? I believe in evolving truth, Owen said. In trying to get closer to something real, even if we never fully get there. She shook her head. That's the most liberal thing I've ever heard. Probably, he replied. There was a pause. A real one. Not a staged silence, but a moment where both of them were thinking the same thing. This isn't supposed to happen. Then Green said something he didn't expect. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, she said, wondering if I've gone too far. Owen blinked. And have you? She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tapped the edge of the table. I don't know anymore, she said. I get death threats. My staff gets followed. But the people back home, they still come to my rallies. Still thank me for standing up. Sometimes I think I'm just their middle finger to the world. Owen said nothing. And other times, she continued, voice softer, I wonder if I'm becoming what I hate. There it was. Not a breakdown. Not a confession. But a rare glimpse of the machinery beneath the persona. The gears grinding. The weight pressing down on someone who had become more symbol than person. Owen finally spoke. You don't have to be a caricature. She looked up sharply. You think that's what I am? I think you're playing a part. And maybe it started as you. But now it's become something else. Something you can't control anymore. Another long pause. Then to his surprise, Green laughed, short, bitter. You ever ride a bull, Bright? Not recently. Well, once you get on, you better hold on. Because you're not getting off without getting thrown. She stood suddenly. This was a mistake. He stood too. Why? Because this isn't how it works. We don't get to talk like this. We're supposed to scream at each other on Twitter and walk away feeling smug. He nodded slowly. So let's break the rules. For a long moment she just stared at him. Then Green turned to the door. You got what you came for. But before she left, she looked back, just once. You're still wrong, she said. Maybe, Owen replied. But at least I'm listening. The door clicked shut. And for the first time since the press conference, it was truly quiet. Outside, the country would keep arguing. The headlines would keep spinning. But inside that small forgotten room in D.C., something had happened.